We live in a society where second chances are rare, but my next guest is an example of why you don't give up on someone. Marty Walsh went from rock bottom to mayor of Boston, United States Secretary of Labor, and now executive director of the National Hockey League Players Association. He joins us to talk about his rise from the construction site to the cabinet room, his struggle with alcoholism, what both parties need to be doing better, and how Democrats win back working class voters. Let's swear into the People's Cabinet, Marty Walsh. Secretary Marty Walsh, welcome to the People's Cabinet.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
This is fun. I wanted to make sure that people saw the extent to the trinkets in this office. You want to give us like 30 seconds on this?
Yeah, everything up there means something. I don't know if you can see the top shelf that my father ran for executive board in Labor's Local 223 a long time ago, was elected, served in the legislature. Picture of me, Laurie, and Lauren the day I got elected, sworn in as mayor of Boston. Picture my mother's class in school, my father's class in school, Max, our grandbaby, in the middle there. Things from when I was a state rep to mayor to labor secretary, and just a bunch of everything up there means something to me. That's up on that shelf. It means something to me personally, and it's just it's important. That picture on the bottom where you see the green outline, that's that picture was in my grandmother's house in Ireland. So I took that from Ireland at one point. So everything means sentimental to me up there.
For those listening, there's a lot of trinkets right now that we're taking a look at. And if you look at the video version of the podcast, you can check it out. But I want you to take me back to April 23rd, 1995, because that was a monumental moment for you.
It was. Let me just go back a little bit further. Grew up in Boston. We'll probably get into it in a little while. Parents from Ireland, immigrant parents. I have a brother. And, grew up in middle class, I guess, house at the time, probably more lower class today, as far as how much money my father made and work-wise. But, I had dreams and aspirations of running for office and being involved in politics. And I was involved in every campaign from the age of when I can remember, holding signs. And I wanted to get into that area. And I was kind of involved in the community. I was coaching. I was running Little League. I was coaching softball. I was coaching Little League, coaching hockey, coaching a bunch of different things and involved in my community. And I had dropped out of college, but I was working for the Laborers Union at the time. And in the daytime, if you saw me, I was a civic activist, I guess you can call me. Not quite what we talk about today, but involved in the community. And at night, I would be out drinking. When I first started drinking many years ago, it was fun. Everyone did it.
And was it like older people just influencing you to do it, or the guys after the construction site?
You just do it. Yeah. I mean, you just kind of go out and have a few beers and have some fun with it, whatever. And over time, alcoholism progression. Over time, that turned from having fun to things happened. I blacked out. Did things I regret. Didn't remember what happened.
Do you have stories that you think about when you think about those times?
Yeah, I share them at Alcoholics Anonymous when we talk at meetings and stuff like that. And April 23rd my office was moving from Newton to Burlington, and we were packing the office up, and just another weekend, if you will, and as far as drinking wise, and completely get obliterated, 3 or 4 nights in a row, 3 nights in a row.
Was there any reason that's precipitated that?
No, it just did it. I go out, have a beer, have a couple beers, and I couldn't have a couple beers. It's like you and I go for a couple drinks, and you'd go home after 2, and I'd stay there for another 20, and it's just the way it was. And I never wanted the party to end, if you will. And April 23rd, I woke up. It was a Sunday morning. I had 3 days of disaster, blackouts and everything else from the days before that, I started drinking in the morning, and then I went to the Bruins game that afternoon, and I was asked to leave the Bruins game, not because I was fighting, because I was loud and drunk and out of control in some ways, and we went across the street to the bar across the street and had another order to drink there, and I passed out at some point along the way. Anyway, I went home. It was probably about 6 o'clock roughly. I wasn't in a blackout, but I was.
Passed out. Someone take you home?
Yeah, I was kind of in a gray out, they call it, in and out. And my roommate at the time took me home. And I woke up that night at 9 o'clock in my house, and I had woken up with this feeling a lot, with this emptiness inside. I did it again. I can't believe I did it again. Not wanting to truly address the problem. I had tried to stop drinking a couple times before that for a couple days, a couple weeks, but nothing through any professional help. And I went to work the next day. went to see my boss. He shut the door and he said, "You're an alcoholic." And I agreed because I was in trouble at work. I didn't necessarily agree with him at the time, but I felt like there was heat on. And he recommended I make a phone call to the EAP emergency program, emergency assistance program, EAP. I called the counselor. He interviewed me. I passed the test. He recommended I go inpatient in a treatment facility. That was not in my plan. My plan was to maybe go to AA meetings. I had gone to one in my life at that point. Go see a counselor, talk to a counselor a little bit about it, and then after a few months when the heat's off, go back, drink like a normal person. That wasn't in the cards for me. I ended up going to treatment, and when I was there, I got an education on alcoholism, and I got some tools I can use to defend myself against a drink, but it's really on the person working the program, if you will. So I got out of treatment. I started going to meetings, saw a counselor, and my life just got better right quickly. I lost the desire for a drink, and I lost that desire, and my life started to just come together.
You said something interesting, that the union helped you and that you're your boss. So tell us about first of all, tell us what a union is.
Yeah.
And then also how they provide services for people.
Yeah, unions were created really at the turn of the 19th, 20th century, most of them. They were created because back in the end of the 18th century, into the 19th century, into the 20th century, there was no work rules or conditions or safety or around salary, and there was certainly no benefits. Employers, if you had a good employer, you were taken care of. If you had a bad employer, you'd be just taken advantage of. And unions really started to form. The laborers union formed, a lot of the building trades union formed, you had the mine workers form, and you had a lot of different unions form. And really what a union allowed back then was a collective voice. Have somebody speak on behalf of an industry, a group of workers, and whether it's contracting, collective bargaining, salary-wise or pension-wise or benefit-wise or whatever it might be. And it's evolved over time into other areas and other industries. And I think, when you think about unions, it's about having worker protection, really what it is, and having worker protection for workers that need protection. Because if you didn't have unions, in some cases, or labor laws, employers could just automatically, arbitrarily get rid of people, pay them whatever they want to pay, make as much profits as possible, and not have to provide benefits. And we would be a very different country if we didn't have organized labor in it. In my union at the time, fast forward to 1995, we have a healthcare plan. And in the healthcare plan, we have benefits, and those benefits provide if you have cancer, if you have something you have to go to the hospital for, you have mental illness, you have addiction, you're covered under the plan. And I was fortunate enough to have a benefit plan that covered substance use, and it covered mental health if you needed it and things like that. And if you don't have those healthcare plans, families. There's no question that people are watching this right now and the head is nodding because they have family members that are struggling with mental health or substance use, and they have no idea where to turn to. And they have no idea about healthcare and benefits and plans and what do we do with this situation because not everyone has that support network around them.
You ever wonder where you would be if that didn't exist?
I think about a lot. I mean, I'd probably be working, hopefully, if I didn't get fired, working for the laborers union in some capacity. Nothing wrong with that. I love the laborers union. But all the dreams I had when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, I would be thinking back on if I took a different road, I'd be in a different place. So, you think about both of those sides. You don't never forget where you came from because I come from the building trades, from the laborers union. My father was a laborer from Ireland, and my mother was from Ireland, and she was a homemaker for many years. So you can't forget where you came from, but you also think about the opportunity that recovery presented to me, which was amazing.
And when you say laborer, what did you do every day when you would show up to work?
I was in construction for a few years, and then I went to work for the Laborers Health and Welfare Benefit Office. My uncle was
construction, literally on the site.
I was
cleaning up.
Yeah, I work on the site construction wise,
Yep.
And then my uncle got me into a job in the benefit office where I was a collection agent, and I went around and talked to contractors that were delinquent on benefit payments to members.
And so, just technically speaking, on unions, I think it's just important for people who don't really know. Is it you pay in a certain amount of your wages to the union, and that's how it works?
They're all different. I mean, so you have
and like how are they formed?
You pay monthly dues, and the monthly dues pay, at least in the building trades for the most part, you pay monthly dues. That money supports the local union, and then you pay hourly dues, which is like anywhere from like 10 cents an hour to probably not much more than that, 10, 15 cents an hour. And that money creates an opportunity for the union to get stronger. The international training, benefits, things like that helps you put plans together. So you're really investing in the future of your protection or your advancement in your career. People view unions as bad, and they're not bad. They represent people. I think that organized labor, I think, has in the 21st century is thinking and needs to think a little more about how to be different representing members and moving forward, because the days of sweatshops and labor laws and things like that, they still pop up in different places, and unions to defend that. But you still need the collective bargaining to support workers moving forward.
And so we've obviously seen like Starbucks and other workers unionize. They have to take their case to the National Labor Relations Board. Is that right? And
Yeah, they
run a
go to
process.
the NLRB, and the sad thing about the NLRB is that you're supposed to be an independent body, but unfortunately it's not. And depending on the administration, one administration will support it, like the Biden administration supported it. It was severely underfunded.
Yeah.
As Labor Secretary, I was able to fight to get some additional money there. And then what I'm seeing now is they want to complete annihilation of the labor board. Workers need a place, whether they're union or not, need a place to be able to bring their case to for unwrongful termination. Things happen like that. You have not every corporation's like that, and you don't need the NLRB for a lot of corporations because they treat their employees fairly. But some corporations, and we saw it when we were at the DOL, we saw meatpacking plants in the Midwest that were using undocumented immigrants cleaning slaughterhouse floors. I mean, you need to have supports to support those workers.
So you run for state rep, you win. You're there for 16 years.
16 years.
Get elected mayor of Boston.
Yeah.
Become Secretary of Labor. Throughout that entire time, you were going to AA.
And I went back to college. I got my degree at BC.
So can you tell us a little bit about what that outlet, so to speak, maybe that's the wrong word, was
Yeah.
like for you? And you obviously should not talk about what's in the AA meetings, but how it works.
Alcoholics Anonymous is an anonymous program, but what it does, it's a group of people that have the same issue, in some cases struggling with the same issue. And what you want to do when you get sober is give it away. And what that means is you support somebody else who's struggling. And you hear people tell a story about where they came in their journey, and they might be talking to me sitting in the crowd going, oh my God, that was me. And you're letting people know that this group of people can help you overcome a challenge that you might not think in your brain that you'll ever overcome. And when I say it's about giving it away, it's about sitting with somebody who is new in recovery and talking to them about what you went through. And ultimately what it does, it's ironic, it's kind of funny, you're giving it away, but you're getting more back because you're helping somebody. And you're helping somebody that was struggling with the disease of alcohol or drugs.
And you went through a multi-step program as part of your...
Yeah, I went to the counseling. I did all the stuff you're supposed to do, and then when you're there, meetings for me today, it's really about just giving me a sense of peace. I thank God I don't have a desire to drink, and this battle with alcoholism is every day, because you just don't know when there's an opportunity and when there's a thought that might come into my head that I think, well, now I have a bunch of years being sober, I can drink now. And some people, I've heard people talk about that. They've been sober 20 years. They go out, pick up, and eventually it picks right up where it left off, meaning the disaster before they got into AA. And, hopefully I'll never get to that point.
And so when you were elected mayor, you had tremendous union support. There were a lot of skeptics in the business community who wondered whether a union guy who didn't get his college degree till he was 42 was going to be able to manage a $3 billion budget with 18,000 employees. And, people don't realize this, but, in the daytime, the population of Boston, doubles. Yeah. And the metro region is something like 4 million people. What was it like for you when people were stereotyping you as like a dumb union guy? And then how did you bridge that divide? Because you were reelected with a 30% margin, and it was very clear from the business community afterwards that you had quelled that notion that unions are bad for business because you were kind of someone who bridged that divide. Yeah,
when I was running for mayor, there was a lot of op-eds in the Globe and the Herald. They were pounding me every day saying, and reporters that you're not going to do this, you can't do that, he's too tied to labor. And, we had a conversation one day in the campaign about it and like how we're going to deal with this. And basically I said, we're going to wear this as a badge of honor. and we're going to go out there and prove them wrong. Ironically, in 2017, when I ran for re-election, the Globe gave me this glowing op-ed how I should get support again because of all the great things I've done in the business community. Meanwhile, there's no acknowledgement of what they did to me 4 years before that and pounding me. I think that it's really, when you think about this, you can do both. I mean, I've been able to prove as a mayor and as labor secretary of the United States that it's okay and you should work with both sides. And when I was the mayor of Boston, I spent a lot of time working with the business community to really think about the growth of the city of Boston. And if Boston in business is growing, that means organized labor can be growing as well. And if there was disputes that were happening between a company, it happened a couple of times with hospitals, and so I'd intervene and just not force the sides to resolve it, but explain to them, just keep the communication going, you'll get it resolved. And the same thing on the national level. I mean, we did it with the Kellogg strike. I got criticized by some Republicans for going to the strike, but we had...
Can you tell a little bit more about that strike?
Yeah, there was a strike with the Kellogg food brand, and I was invited to the picket line by the workers, so we went to the picket line to talk to the workers, and we had reached out to the company. My office reached out to the company, and we sat with them, and we didn't sit with them. We talked to them for a little bit about their strike and what they were going on, and they really didn't hate the company. They were just disappointed by the lack of proposals that they were looking at. After we left that, I got criticized by some members of Congress. They wanted to call a hearing on it. Meanwhile, I think like 2 weeks later, the strike was resolved, and the CEO of Kellogg called me to thank me for coming out because it unlocked the wedge. And that's a perfect example of politics playing in the case where you have a legit workers dispute between workers and management where you want to get it resolved for the good of the workers and the management and the company and the public. And then you have members of Congress that want to use it as an opportunity to kind of just hold a hearing and blast away at me or whoever it is when they don't have reality of what the situation is on the ground, when they should be, as members of Congress, trying to resolve the issue and not point them fingers.
Well, you touch on an interesting point because, I want to get to the Trump administration now. There is a presentation of the Trump administration as a pro-worker administration. I think you and I both know that there are serious issues with that characterization. But it's very clear that, at least at the rank and file level, a lot of union members are pro-Trump. And the president has kind of ridden that wave to promote that. What's your opinion of the worker policy or perspectives of the Trump administration?
I mean, they've gone after, obviously, Department of Labor, some areas in the Department of Labor. And I think that, I think the message out of Washington right now is very confusing and very mixed. I think that when you're talking about tariffs and you're talking about, all these things that this administration is doing, it counters growth of the economy. And I think that, putting tariffs on Canada and European countries and stuff, it might sound good on the surface, but it necessarily isn't good for us as an economy. And there's, this fear of recession coming. And if we're going to go into a recession, we don't want to be driven into the recession. And we have no idea when we get out of the recession. So I think the policies, and this might sound like a criticism, but I think that if you're going to put tariffs on, you should have policies in place for how you're going to keep the economy moving forward. And it doesn't seem that's the case we're doing today. We're kind of taking every day we wake up to a new kind of shiny object over here to go after. And I think that, when you think about pro-worker, bringing back manufacturing jobs in the United States is great. You look at the last 30 years, we've been losing manufacturing jobs. In the Biden administration, even though he's not going to get credit for it, he actually brought manufacturing jobs back to America. The CHIPS bill actually was created to create chips, the chips that are in our phones and in our computers. 90% of those chips, we're dependent on Taiwan and other places in the world to buy those chips. After the CHIPS bill goes through and we build these factories, I believe it almost flips the other way, where 90% of those chips we built in America, we'll be exporting them to other countries. Like, those are the things we should be talking about as far as building manufacturing jobs, not being critical. Whether you like electric vehicles or not, they're here to stay. Now, you and I have had conversations about autonomous vehicles and when are we going to get there when we're in the mayor's office. We have an opportunity here with electric vehicles to create an industry and own the industry. Tesla builds a lot of cars here, but they also build cars all over the world. Ford and GM, they build their cars here. So, and they're electric vehicles. No one's criticizing Tesla about it's all electric vehicle. No one's criticizing them, but we're criticizing the industry. That there's just something not right here. So I think to answer your initial question, I just think that as far as work or policy moving forward, I don't think the way that we're seeing things rolled out today is not the right way to move forward on worker policy.
What do you think of Elon's comments on unions? Obviously, he's been critical in the past, and you've met Elon.
Yeah, we sat with him. We met him for 2 hours roughly, and we went around. And he wasn't that talkative that day about unions, but obviously I think he says what comes to his mind, and I think that can be dangerous. Sometimes you have to think through what's going on. I mean, like you said, there's no secret. Many union members voted for the president Trump. And they believed in whether it's the social issues or whatever reason they voted for him, they believed in him. And you have people like Elon Musk, who's not elected, not really technically appointed, who is in the free market. He's a capitalist. He goes out there, he does his thing, and now he's telling us how we should his opinion on unions. And I think people are taking it as that's President Trump's opinion. Well, I heard President Trump talk when he met with the Teamsters afterwards that he was open to talking to organized labor. I heard him say that. He said it on TV. So that counters what the president feels, or he has always been real clear on exactly what the feeling is there.
You talked about the president's message. Why do you think Democrats seemingly continue to be losing the kind of people that you knew on the construction side?
Well, first of all, we don't have a message. I mean, it's a party, we don't have a message. I think that, I think everyone's trying to figure out how to respond to this administration today, but I don't think we learned from the first 4 years of the Trump administration how to respond to it. And I don't think, President Biden was a bridge. People thought it was going to be a bridge to the future. It was a bridge to another Trump administration. And I think that Democrats need to start thinking about, as far as Democratic leadership, and when I say leadership, every member of Congress and every member of the Senate needs to start realizing, go back to your first race. And when you were trying to win the race, you were the most connected to the average person at that particular moment in time. And then you get elected to Congress, whether it's the Senate or the House, and it goes for mayors or whatever elected officials you want. And a lot of times people get separated from that first race, and you kind of believe in the policy and the system that's put in place, and you believe in that what you're doing is right. I mean, they're holding hearings and beating people up in hearings. They should be out in the community talking to people, not in town halls. They should be out like in coffee shops and other places talking to people. And I think that mayors have to do that. I mean, you have to do that as a mayor. I mean, and I'm a little sensitive in defending mayors, but, mayors go out, they're in coffee shops, they go to ribbon cuttings, they're talking to people all day long. Congress members, and they're always in Washington, or they're flying wherever they're going, which is fine. I'm not discrediting them, but they hold a hearing, and they think the hearing is like the big important thing in their life. No one's watching it, first of all, and it's always about beating up the other side. There are some members, obviously, that work bipartisan, but even the bipartisan stuff, everyone's afraid of the left or the right. Because if you go too bipartisan, you're labeled as you're not a Democrat. I mean, you and I saw this when I first started at the Department of Labor. I think some of the folks that we work with thought I was a Republican. And when I left, they were like, "Oh my God, we accomplished so much." And it's like, why not talk to the other side? And so I think Democrats, I think it's about messaging, number one, but it's also talking about the issues that care for people right now are concerned about the price of food. They're concerned about their small savings. They're concerned about paying their rent, paying their mortgage, raising their family. That's what they're concerned about. They're not concerned about some of the big picture items that we've been talking about for the last 4 years. That like student loan debt, great, it's a big issue, I guess. But most people aren't thinking about student loan debt because their kids can't afford to go to college, so they can't do that. So I think that we have to think about what are our messaging points, and why, if we truly are a party for anybody, we should be able to represent the conservative Democrat or the conservative Republican if they want to follow a candidate. But we don't create that space for them today.
So if you were a member of Congress or, at any level, and you were in the communities, what would you be saying, or what would you be listening for?
I'd be listening to people, what they have to say. I mean, I think I experienced it when I was down in D.C., members of Congress telling me how to run the Department of Labor. I'm like, okay, but you're wrong. And I would challenge some people. I think we're at a point in time where we need to listen to people. I think that we have this system of government that we've had pretty much since the inception. We're pretty much a two-party system. At the end of the day, it's about Democrat, Republican, who's in the final, how do you win? But when you look at the people that have registered to vote, the majority of the country is independent. So they don't have a side. They don't pick a side. When I grew up in a Democratic Union household. And, my parents came from Ireland, so let's pick a different family. Go back 3 or 4 generations of American being here in America. Democrat Union, it got passed down through through generations. That's not the case today. It stopped. So I think we have to really have a real serious conversation about what people are concerned about, and then focus on those issues. But you still have to focus as a Democrat. In office, you still got to worry about people's rights. You got to worry about the LGBTQ community. You got to worry about the transgender community. You got to worry about the immigrant community. But don't get caught up when you talk about the immigrant community. Don't get caught up in protecting criminals, because people are frustrated with it.
Well, tell us about your opinion on all the issues around migrants in Massachusetts.
I think that it comes from two different standpoints. I think that when you think about immigrants and what the Trump administration is doing, they're rounding up people that were or perceived to be or not convicted, but arrested of criminal acts. I understand what they're doing. And the reason why they were able to round people up so far is because the justice system has identified, they already know who these people are, so they're just picking them up and throwing them out, that's their purview. But the issue is that there are people here in this country that came here through asylum or whatever reason that are hardworking people. So on the sense of the criminal activity, I don't think we should have criminals in the United States of America that are here undocumented, wreaking havoc and causing danger for people, for Americans or other immigrants. They shouldn't be here. We don't need that. We don't need that in our country. We shouldn't have to jam up our criminal justice system taking care of people that are causing crimes and havoc and not potentially going on the right track. On the other side, economically, and I'm surprised with this, I've spoken to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce about this. There's a need in America for workers. We have more jobs open in America, all throughout America in different industries, than we have people that have green cards or citizenship that live in this country that can do those jobs. So our economy needs workers as we grow different areas.
So how do we change the narrative then? Because I think there's a narrative out there that immigration, not as completely bad, but a lot of the talk around immigration, people think immigration, they think migrant,
it's
kind of illegal immigration.
That's the perfect example of what's happening here. So, and this could be flipped. So I'll use this example today, and then we can get another example in a minute. In this particular issue, most Republicans are all like, yeah, get rid of the undocumented, and they're using it as a ploy to get other Republicans elected and not really understanding the issue of the issue. Now, Democrats do the same thing with another issue if they were in control. They want to do the same thing. And I think that there's so much fear there that no one wants to come up with a resolution. There was a resolution. There was a bill passed in the Senate last year by a bipartisan bill. Democrats, Republicans got together. You didn't hear about it in the newspaper. They weren't beating each other up. It passed the Senate, and it got stopped in the House because Johnson, the Speaker, stopped it because he had a presidential election moving forward. And the business community was silent on it, and they should have been vocal on it, saying, and quite honestly, labor should have been vocal on it as well, saying that we need to pass this legislation. And now that set us back. Now, I don't think we can, in this Congress, I don't think they can pass a bill like that, because it's not necessarily about the fundamental issue in front of them. It's about the winning the score points on social media, on the talk shows or whatever it is. That's what it's all about. And again, it goes back to, at the end of the day, I think the people are going to be damaged by all of this rhetoric going on in Washington is the elected official himself.
So how much do you think personality is part of some of the way that people are perceiving elected officials these days? You're known for your no bullshit. I won't say the word, but you've known to use very colorful language that is kind of endemic to Boston that both of us use. How do you think about personality as part of all of this and the kind of rhetoric or talk that tends to come, I would argue, a lot from the Democratic Party that may not be as real, or how real people talk?
Well, first of all, you're elected to represent people, okay? You're not necessarily elected to represent a point of view. And now you have a point of view, and you have a discussion on it, and you have a vote on it, so you can vote the way you want. But you have to really be willing to be able to sit down and talk to everybody about a particular issue. Now, they're going to get heated and hot. And I learned this a long time ago when I was, any role I ever held, but let's say state rep or mayor, when somebody comes up to me to talk about an issue, it's the most important issue in that person's life. because they get the elected official, they're able to talk about it, they have a vote, they put you in or vote you out, and they want to talk about it. As an elected official, you might realize, well, this issue is not as big as that they're making it out to be, but for that particular person, it is. So I think that's why it's important to understand the different perspectives, but also explain to people. When I was a state rep, and the two occasions, one was marriage equality, and the other was raising taxes. I went around to the civic associations. And I knew marriage equality in my district at the time in 2004 and 5 wasn't necessarily top of mind.
Well, let me interrupt you in that before you keep going, because I think, there's a lot of talk about woke culture and anti-woke and those culture wars being a factor now. You tell me, but I would argue the marriage equality debate was the woke of the era, right?
I don't know if it's woke. I mean, I don't,
Meaning that there were people uncomfortable with the cultural implications in the same way that
they were, and they didn't understand it. I think the woke stuff, when you talk about, we'll come back to marriage equality in a second. I think it's the people make up a decision to do something, whether it's to use the pronouns or whatever it might be, and like all of a sudden the whole world has to do it. And if you don't do it, you're wrong. That's where the problem comes into play. If somebody doesn't want to describe as he, him, they shouldn't have to. And if somebody wants to, they should be able to. And there should be no criticism if people do that, because what's happened is they've turned pronouns into this culture war, which is not really fair. And I don't even know where it came from, but it's like if you don't use it, you're terrible, and if you use it, you're embarrassment, and it comes there. I think marriage equality, to come back to that in Massachusetts for me, just to finish my point. I explained, I went to civic association meetings, I went to senior buildings, I was talking to people in the street about why I decided to vote, why I was just voting the way I want, the way I was voting because the way I thought was the right way to go.
And how did you come to that conclusion yourself personally? Because it wasn't that as popular back then as it is now.
I mean, 97, I got elected to the House. There was a bill, domestic partner benefits, that didn't go anywhere. 2001, I believe, there was a civil union bill, didn't go anywhere. And none of these bills were moving. It was just domestic partner benefits was allowing people who work for state agencies or government and private side that they could put their significant other on a health insurance policy. It was pretty simple when you think about it now. It's ridiculous. We didn't even do it. But and then the Supreme Court of Massachusetts came down with, there was a case brought through the Supreme Court of Massachusetts, and they ruled that marriage is the definition of marriage is not a man and a woman, and then it was that gay marriage was allowed, marriage equality is allowed. And what we had to do in the legislature was preserve that in the Constitution. And in 2004, I would say my district, if I polled it, probably was, 60-40 maybe against it, not fully understanding the implications, because it was kind of like, oh my God, this is the first place in the world, Massachusetts, where marriage equality came up. And I got a call from the day that the Supreme Court ruled it. Liz Malia, a dear friend of mine from Jamaica Plain, a state rep, called me up, and she, kiddingly but seriously said, I need a white Irish Catholic straight guy to help us with this fight. And I was, I looked at it, and I thought very quickly, realized that this is potentially the civil rights issue of my time that I have an opportunity to be part of on the right side. And that's why, there was no hesitation. And then I went out and talked to the community and just listened to them on their concerns and talked about it. And, I had an opponent the next election who ran against me for this marriage equality.
Just on that main issues.
Yeah. And I got 93% of the vote. So I guess the right thing was done there. And then on taxes, we had terrible times in the legislature in 2002, 2003, fiscally. And, I voted for a tax package to keep the state afloat. And some of it expired. It was a package that was put together that changed some policies, but some of it, when we hit something economic triggers, the tax would go back down. So it was the right way to do the tax bill. And I went around telling people what we were going to do about that bill. And I think it's people want to understand what their elected officials doing. And that was, I represented 37,000 people as a state rep, so you could pretty much do it pretty easily. But when I was mayor of Boston, I represented 700,000 people, so I could do the same thing. So it is about creating access and listening to people. So to go back to the Democrat-Republican thing, I think the Democrats, that, they're trying to figure out how to respond to this administration currently in the White House. What they should be thinking about, in my opinion, is not just that, but thinking about how do you win back voters that that we've lost that traditionally have voted with for Democratic candidates. And I think when it comes to organized labor, people always have quick to point out that 57% of labor union members are voting for Trump or whatever it is, and it's not that high, but let's say it is for this conversation. Well, union members, take away the union for a minute, that's the public. So they're no different than the average person next door that might not be part of a union, and everyone kind of blames the unions. But I think there's an opportunity for better messaging there. And I think, granted, listen, the social issues are important to a lot of people. They're important to me. But I think that if I believe in something, if marriage equality, in 2004, I believed in marriage equality, and I still do today. If somebody didn't agree with me on that, that doesn't mean I shut them off completely. Because there'll be another issue another day that I can win them back. And it showed in my election that year, 93% of the people who went out to vote voted for me.
So you talked a little bit about marriage equality and kind of the cultural conversations that we've been having recently. Obviously, diversity, equity, inclusion is under fire, a lot of conversation and controversy. As a white Irish guy, as you alluded to, you've been very outspoken for a very long time about the value of diversity. When you were first elected mayor of Boston, you pledged that half of your cabinet were people of color. I was one of them. I'm just curious on your perspective on that, because I think you, as a straight white Irish guy, making these statements and being steadfast is quite striking for people.
Yeah. Again, go back to the culture of Washington today. DEI has become a lightning rod of an issue, and not so. It's a lightning rod down there, and it's actually not as lightning as I thought it would be, quite honestly. But it's a lightning rod down there as far as the way people are responding and not pushing back. When I became mayor of Boston, I ran for mayor of Boston. The neighborhoods are diverse. You have certain parts of Boston that are, majority of African American. You have parts of Boston Haitian. You have parts of Boston Irish, white Irish, or American, or Italian, or Polish, or whatever it might be. All the Asian, different ethnic groups, and all there. And when you're running for mayor of Boston, you're campaigning in all those areas. And it only makes sense when you get elected to office that your office reflects the community that you are representing. And I think when it comes to companies that have DEI policies that got rid of them, well, your clients are people in those same communities that I represent as mayor. So why wouldn't you want people in your administration that reflects the people that you service or whatever it might be? And I think that, tying universities, the biggest fear I see right now is universities and colleges and law firms, like going after them for DEI policies and not giving them funding. Well, that's insane, because these institutions are, in most cases, the biggest employer in the community. They employ lots of different people. The grants that they fund them with are doing life-saving work over time, and it's dangerous, quite honestly, what's potentially happening with NIH funding and stuff like that over DEI policies and not eliminating DEI policies and tying all that together. That's where the confusion comes into play for me.
What would you do if you were a university president and you had something like this you were dealing with?
I mean, I think my first instinct, I'd want to fight back on it, but my second instinct is, wait a second, I get $50 million in NIH funding. If I fight back, I'm going to lose my money. That's what it looks like. So I think they're in a very awkward, bad place right now on how to respond. And I think, again, the decisions that are being made, they're not looking at the repercussions of those decisions. Some of the days, I forget what was the first. I don't know. The administration did something on the first day, but they also pulled out of the World Health Forum. And I was like, oh, it was. I think they deported some worker. They caught a kid who was part of MS-13 or something. I think that was 2 or 3, and they deported and made a big stink about it, which is great, good for them. The other side is we pull out of the World Health Forum. Which potential is the greater risk to lost lives? Pulling out of World Health Forum. The NIH funding, pulling the cancer treatment funding. The other day, they were going after money at the Pentagon for Moonshot. President Biden's initiative, because his son died of cancer. If you're that petty about this, come on, like seriously. But the damage you're doing as a cancer survivor. When I had cancer, I had Burkitt's lymphoma at the age of 7 in 1974. The survival rate was like 30%. Today, the survival rate's like 90%.
Do you remember when you were diagnosed? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember
what you were feeling.
Yeah,
did you know the survival rates?
No, I didn't know that. I didn't know any of that stuff. You're a kid and you're sick and you hope you feel better. I mean, you're not thinking about death or what's going to happen. And unfortunately, that's what your parents and your family go through. But when you're that
Could
young,
you tell they were worried?
you could tell, but again, it was just different. Like I always wanted to be home. My father would come in and he would be working a lot of time nights. He'd come in and see me in the daytime. My mother would come in and see me, and my brother was a baby at the time. He's 3-4 years old when he went through that. So it was hard on him too. I think probably because he was so young and being bounced around. But you don't think about it. But the research. The research that's been done is amazing. I had a chance a couple weeks ago to go back over part of my job with the National Hockey League Players Association. In the National Hockey League, we partnered with the V Foundation to do cancer research, and we were able to give a $600,000 grant to Boston Children's Hospital. And it was nice to be there because, I remember being a kid in there, and that $600,000 grant that's going there, we know is going to research. And if these doctors and scientists have to worry about NIH funding getting cut, well, that's going to end life work, and the danger for that, and you don't recover from that overnight. It's not like changing tax policy that can be changed back in 4 years. This is something that you lose that time, and you might have somebody who's 70-something years old working on a cure for something, and all of a sudden now this 4-year period they lose the funding. Well, they might not be in the business 4 years from now. They might have passed away. They might retire. You just don't know what we're going to miss out on. So I get worried about that.
So you alluded to this, but you're now executive director of the NHL Players Union.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of conversation about sports fans and sports and politics and how it all jives together. Yeah. How do you think about this as a Democrat, as a vocal Democrat, and a population of hockey fans that I'm sure there are some and many Democrats, but there are people all across the aisle. How do you feel the role of politics in sports is?
It's historically politics and sports, as far as organizations like ours and the leagues, they don't get involved in politics. Meaning, you leave it up to the individuals and within the players or the owners of the teams or whatever. They get involved in stuff. You have owners of the teams that supported Republicans. You have owners of teams that supported Democrats. You have some players that supported, in America, Democrats, Republicans, and Canada, they support different party system up there, or they come from different international countries. They support different things. So you don't mix the politics into it. Some players like Tom Brady and Wayne Gretzky have kind of veered into this lane at certain points. I think it's unfortunate that Wayne Gretzky, who's the greatest hockey player of all time, is being criticized. He gave his opinion on Trump, and if he had asked me for my advice, and coming from me, it's kind of like, oh, I'd be like, just stay out of it. But he's a person; he should have a right to say what he wants to say. And I think that but they're held up on a different pedestal. So most players kind of just stay out of politics. They just don't. It's not worth it to them. They have their opinion privately. We'll talk about it, but it's sports in a lot of ways is entertainment. So people go to sports to get away from the talking heads. People go to sports to get away from the noise around the world. They want to go and they want to watch that sport, whatever sport it is, any sport, doesn't matter, and they don't want to get caught up in the politics. And I think that's, in some ways, you can't tell a player not to get involved in this stuff because it's their personal right to do it. But sometimes people going to watch them to get away from it.
So you talked a little bit about Republicans and sports and the pathway forward. I want to touch now on, we have the midterms are coming up in 26. We also have the presidential election. It's kind of hard to believe, but people are already talking about it.
Yeah.
If you were advising a presidential candidate, what kind of vision would you present to him or her about how they should be thinking about the way they talk about all of the things that you've discussed today?
Well, it's going to be funny because I'm going to talk to both parties here because I think both parties are going through the same thing. I think the Republicans are, at least from where I'm sitting, are trying to figure out who they are in the future. And the Democrats are trying to figure out how do we regain what we've lost and who we are in the future. And I think both parties are thinking the same way. And I think that, civility is going to have to be part of this conversation. I think that reaching, whether you're in the heat of the battle, so you're fighting the other side, obviously, so you have that battle. But then how do you bring people together after that? And I think that that's something that, so I think the parties, Democratic side, Republican side, what are the issues that are going to be important to us moving in the rest of the 21st century? I think I'd be paying attention to the economy. I'd be paying attention to AI. I'd be paying attention to the workplace. I'd be paying attention to what is the next boom in our country. I'd be paying attention to our infrastructure. I'd be paying attention to can we stay on a competitive global scale with these other countries? America's the best country in the world. There's no question about it. But in order for us to continue to be the best country in the world, let's not defeat ourselves from within. And I think that that's a lot of what's happening right now. And I think that it's really going to be when I ran for mayor of Boston, my platform, a bunch of different things I wanted to talk about, but it was how do we continue to grow economically? When I got elected, you and I had these conversations. How do we keep college students that go to college in Boston and not go to New York and Chicago and LA and Silicon Valley? And what did we do? We went out and recruited companies coming to the city of Boston. So we thought about the future of Boston. And I think the elected officials, to answer the question, it's not that simple, but if you're going to run for president, you got to think about what type of America should we be going into the next phase of the next quarter, if you will, of the 21st century. And I don't think the first 25 years, I think we just kind of ran off of what happened the previous 20th century. I think 21st, a little different. We have to think about who we are, and I think we have to pay a little more attention to that.
And for unions, unfortunately, we've seen there was a little bit of an uptick while you were labor secretary and under President Biden, but for the longer term trend of union participation is not a good one. What advice do you give for union members in the future of unions?
I think you have to go out and explain what a union is. I think that there has to be education on what a union is and who they represent. I mean, when the Starbucks workers went to organize, they went to organize because they were frustrated not being listened to, and they felt that they were being unfairly treated and their wages weren't there. So when somebody organized a company, that's a message to the owner that you have a problem. So don't just simply say, well, they're just a pain. You had the whole industry of Starbucks wanting to organize. You have a cultural issue there. And if you had a cultural issue with customers coming in, you would address that issue. You would fix your product. You would change whatever it is. You'd change the recipe. You might put new paint on the wall, whatever it might be. So if workers are frustrated, you should pay attention to what they have to say too. You have doctors around the country organizing right now. Well, people saying they're disruptive. They're not disruptive. They're disappointed, or they're concerned about the industry.
And they're exhausted.
So let's figure out why they're organizing and what the issue is. Because if patients stopped going to the hospital, you would deal with the issue. I remember talking to, I was in Davos with the World Economic Forum when I was the labor secretary, and there was a large worldwide corporation. I sat with the head of the worldwide corporation, and he had asked me, how do I deal with unions? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, how do I have a conversation with unions? I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you ever bring the president of the union in to talk to you? He goes, no, my human resource person does. I said to him, do you talk to your customers? He goes, yes. I said, do you talk to your suppliers? Yes. Do you talk to your vendors? Yes. Then why wouldn't you talk to the workers? And he kind of sat there, never dawned on him for him to pick up the phone and call. And so I think a lot of that, it goes back what we talked about a lot in this conversation about communication. So it is about having these dialogues. So I think organized labor needs to do, I think a couple things. I think number one, educate what a union is. I don't think people fully understand what a union is. And I think before you start suggesting to workers how they vote, you need to give them a reason why you're going to tell them you should vote for X candidate, or we should do this policy for the reason. Because when you're a union, if you're making a drastic change in policy in the office, again, go back to the corporations. You talk to the workers. You talk to your clients to change the policy. In the unions, if you're going to change something, you talk to the workers. In this particular case, I think a lot of that communication is gone. Computer, technology, IT, all that, social. But that's not talking to the workers. It has to be on the ground in the job sites.
So you talked a little bit about what we need to be saying to unions. What is the one message that you may have for a MAGA voter or a disaffected voter in their communities, in communities all around this country, that you would want to talk to listeners and say, this is what you should say to them?
I think I would say that elected officials need to be out in the communities talking to the other side, talking to these voters. And they need to get out of their offices, and they need to start talking to people and listening to what they have to say, because they've gotten to a point in their life, whether it's MAGA or whether it's super left or whatever the definitions are, they're disgruntled and they're not happy. And you need to go out and meet them where they're at and ask them, talk to them about it. Now, they might yell at you, but that's okay. You get paid to get yelled at. You get paid to take crap from people. That's your job as an elected official. It's not all roses and lovey-dovey. I mean, we face that. But you have to do that. And I think that, people, people will get disgruntled and they'll give you a lot of grief, but they'll eventually appreciate the fact that you came and spoke to them and not hung up on them.
What are your favorite kinds of events where you see people who may not be as politically involved, but you're able to connect with them?
Oh, you go to any community, if you're down the South, you go to country fairs, you're in Boston, you go to family fun days, you go to street block parties, depending on where you are in the country, there's something going on everywhere. Go someplace where they're not expecting you. And don't stage it. It's not your event. Go to other places. Because you put an event together, everyone loves you because it's your event. They come to support you. You want to go to places where people aren't expecting you. That's where you'll get. Go to a train station. Stand at the front when people come home from work. When they're going to work, they're not focused. They're just busy to get to work. Stand at the train station when they're coming home from work after a tough day and let them vent to you. And so you can understand what their concerns are.
Marty Walsh, thank you for coming on the People's Cabinet.
Thanks, Dan. This has been great.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the People's Cabinet. If you did, please like, subscribe, ring that bell, and put in the comments below who else you'd like to see sworn in. And stay tuned for new episodes every Tuesday. Let's go.